It was a hot summer night, the crackle of a distant thunderstorm only adding to the sense of excitement which filled the air. Kathy had been working at the huge mansion since mid-morning, where a society event was being hosted. In comparison, the money wasn't great, but the hours were long, starting before lunchtime and running well into the evening, so the effort was certainly worth her while. Her university bills were starting to pile up quite considerably now, and she needed to replenish her funds. Unlike some of her wealthier peers, Kathy wasn't a trust fund baby and had to make her own way in life. Something the owner of this mansion knew all about, as it happened, for tonight's party was being held to celebrate his 40th birthday. Sir Samuel Latimer had Kathy's full respect because he'd come from nothing to carve out a multi-million-pound empire. Quite rightly, Samuel was celebrating in style, and Kathy couldn't begrudge him that. Naturally, the party was jam-packed with local socialites, some of whom Kathy had seen at other events. Being a local girl, she was vaguely aware of celebrities who lived in the area, including Samuel, although she had never met him before. As Kathy scurried in and out of the main hall with canapes, she tried not to stare whenever she recognized someone famous. There had even been rumors of a certain prince and princess visiting, although nobody of royal blood had materialized yet. Regardless, Kathy had barely stopped all day, and consequently, her feet were absolutely hurting her. Thankfully, reprieve eventually arrived in the form of a half-hour break, so it wasn't surprising she felt a sense of helplessness to hear her name being called, just as the clock started ticking. "Yes, Mrs. Sanderson," Kathy replied, trying to look alert and happy to be speaking with her boss even though she felt fatigued. After all, she needed this job and more jobs like it in the future if she was going to pay off her tuition debts. "Oh, were you just about to take a break?" "I was," confirmed Kathy diplomatically. "But is there something you need me to take care of first?" "Yes, please, if you don't mind," admitted Mrs. Sanderson, looking as stressed as she always did in the middle of an event. "Could you check the items in the ladies, please? I've just been informed that we're low on hairspray." "Of course," replied Kathy, putting down the cutlery and plate she'd just collected for her dinner. "I'll go straight away." Grabbing the basket of beauty products, Kathy made her way towards the ladies' cloakroom, trying to ignore her grumbling tummy which hadn't been nourished for 8 hours straight. Mrs. Sanderson offered an additional service which was supplying various essential products to the bathrooms, such as hairspray, moisturizers, deodorant, and emergency makeup items. This was always well received by the clients, but it did require somebody to keep the baskets filled. In Kathy's opinion, the way to judge if you were somewhere luxurious was when the bathrooms had individual hand towels with which to dry your hands, and this place certainly didn't disappoint. As she walked along the numerous baskets in front of spotless mirrors and interspersed with floral bouquets, Kathy became horribly aware of her plain appearance. Dressed in a black skirt and white shirt, she was very much a monotone moth in a room full of exquisitely bedecked butterflies. 2 such butterflies, clothed in expensive designer dresses which displayed an excessive expanse of cleavage, were flamboyantly adorning themselves. Instinctively, Kathy knew their hairstyles for that evening cost more than her entire wages for the day. "Well, what is his preference then?" inquired one, pushing in front of Kathy, as though she simply didn't exist. "I mean, will I do?" Pulling her most pouty face in the smear-free mirror, it caused her collagen lips to look even more artificial. "Well?" she demanded when her companion failed to respond. "You'll definitely do," her friend quickly replied, hiking up one chest and then the other. "What's his type?" It was perfectly obvious to Kathy as she went about her business that the 2 beauties were discussing their host. Indeed, she guessed their entire efforts over the course of the evening had been pre-planned in an attempt to ensnare such a wealthy bachelor, the birthday boy himself. Silently, she felt sorry for the guy, to be discussed in such a vulgar manner. "Not sure he's got a type, to be honest," admitted the other woman, now waylaid with replenishing her lipstick and checking she hadn't got any stuck between her teeth. "But he doesn't exactly, you know?" "What?" "Spread it around." "You mean he's waiting for the one?" The woman groaned, flashing her eyes dramatically. "Well, I can play nice for a few months. It would be worth it for all the wealth I'd be exposed to." "You're such a gold digger." The 2 women giggled in great amusement until they caught sight of an astonished Kathy, who was struggling to believe anyone could be quite so shallow and heartless. "What are you staring at?" the ringleader demanded aggressively. Kathy was so taken aback at their disrespect, she had no idea how to respond. Yeah. You're here to clean the toilets, not to have an opinion, she mocked. So do try not to eavesdrop. To be perfectly honest with you, not listening to you is fairly difficult, admitted Kathy, sending them both a very false smile, before turning her back on them to continue with her work. Consequently, she missed their joint glare, before the two ugly stepsisters launched back into their previous conversation. Well, step number 1 is to secure a dance with him. Then I can weave my magic spell. Kathy discreetly rolled her eyes, surprised to discover there truly were women like this in the world, totally devoid of integrity, and out to snap up a rich man at any cost. She had thought, or perhaps hoped, such characters were just the creation of imaginative commentators. And how are you going to manage that? He's permanently surrounded and seems far more interested in talking to his friends than dancing. Plus, I've already seen him turn down a few requests. You're not going to get a sympathetic dance from Samuel. If you'd like an outside opinion, desperation is never a good look on a woman. Kathy's statement was said so sweetly that it took a few seconds before the women realized they'd been insulted at all. Goodness, she hated false people, particularly those with their fingers stuck quite so far up their own noses. Kathy knew her behavior could result in a complaint, but sometimes even toilet cleaners had to stand up for themselves, no matter what the consequence. "What the heck do you know?" snapped one of them. "Look at the state of you." And with that, they both pouted for real this time, turned, and flounced out. Taking the advice of her newly found enemy, Kathy gazed into the mirror. She certainly couldn't match the beautifully made-up women who had just departed, but her reflection didn't immediately make her want to retch either. With lightly applied makeup, a natural blush from racing around and receiving insults, sparkling blue eyes and her blonde hair piled into a topknot on her head, Kathy acknowledged she wasn't beautiful, but she still exhibited a degree of natural charm. Besides, having recently reached the grand old age of 21, she refused to feel bad about herself, simply because she was wearing a waitress's uniform as opposed to a priceless Vivienne Westwood. Having completed her duties in the bathroom, Kathy returned to the kitchen to grab her long-awaited meal. Finding a quiet corner out the back, she devoured her food, the threat of indigestion forever present. Fast was the only way to eat on this kind of job. In theory, every staff member was supposed to get a half-hour break, but that never happened in reality. Sure enough, barely 10 minutes later, Kathy was being called. Wiping away any remnants of food from her lips, Kathy stood. Instantly, she became highly aware of her footwear. Her heels were already starting to make her feet hurt. Straightening her skirt, she grabbed a tray of pre-filled glasses and made her way through to the banquet room. As she undertook her duties, offering a glass of drink to any guest not already holding one, Kathy noticed one of the unattractive stepsisters loitering near the birthday boy himself. Poor fellow, he literally had no idea what he was in for. Deliberately, she headed in a different direction, in order to avoid further confrontation, before noticing that all her colleagues were already fanned out in that direction. "Waitress," called a high-pitched, undeniably rude voice which she recognized. Biting back her attitude, Kathy forced a smile onto her face and turned towards the very woman she'd been trying to avoid. As her group of squealing friends each snatched up a glass of bubbly, Kathy stood there in silence, a neutral look fixed upon her face in order to avoid any further arguments. That didn't stop the unattractive stepsister smirking at her as she took a glass, highlighting the extreme difference in their social class. Thankfully, when Kathy glanced at the tray she was holding, it was to acknowledge that she only had one glass remaining. Time to make herself scarce. But as she turned to leave, a deep male voice spoke to her. It stood out because the tone was firm but also gentle and kindness was something that had been sadly lacking from this event so far. "One moment, please, might I take that?" Kathy turned in the direction of the voice, only to see the birthday boy himself approaching. His question amused her somewhat. Given he was paying an astronomical fee for the catering, as far as Kathy was concerned, he could take every last glass of drink he wished. Of course, she beamed. Offering the tray in his direction, she was temporarily surprised by just how tall he was, up close, and the intensity of his gaze. For a long, precious moment, their eyes locked, causing Kathy to swallow hard as a coldness filled her skull. Meanwhile, heat flooded her abdomen. It was a highly unexpected reaction, particularly given the man was a complete stranger to her. "Thank you?" And then he waited, leaving no doubt that she was expected to fill in the pause with her name. Unfortunately, Kathy was struggling to remember what that name was. Kathy," she stumbled. "Thank you, Kathy. I'm very obliged." And then with a look that lingered far longer than strictly necessary, Samuel eventually smiled and released her from his gentle gaze. Given her face was now flushed and her knees shaking, only an imbecile would remain oblivious to the reaction the rather charming man was having on her. With a final smile and nod of her head, Kathy turned around and walked as quickly as she possibly could without breaking into a run, back to the sanctuary of the kitchen. Taking deep breaths, she grabbed a glass of iced water and drank it in one. "You okay?" asked one of her colleagues. "Fine, thanks, just a bit warm." "Yeah, I know. It's stifling there, isn't it?" Kathy nodded in agreement, failing to mention that her raised temperature had nothing to do with the heating system and everything to do with the most attractive guy she'd ever had cause to speak with. The party was due to continue into the early hours, but the catering company was only contracted to remain on site until midnight. Several minibuses of staff had already left, leaving a skeleton crew of which Kathy was a member. She didn't doubt this was because she lived relatively close, so had her own transport. When Mrs. Sanderson eventually confirmed she could leave, Kathy breathed a sigh of relief. Her feet were aching unbearably, and she replaced her heels with flat shoes for driving. Having said goodnight to her remaining colleagues, she grabbed her bag and coat and began to walk away, just as the band started to play one of her favorite songs. Unable to prevent herself, Kathy paused in her departure, captivated by the entrancing ballroom scene. Leaning against one of the great marble pillars in the function room, Kathy observed the timeless affair. Beneath twinkling lights, beautiful women were being swirled around the dance floor by handsome men, just as the grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight. She truly could have been in a scene from Cinderella, just as long as she wasn't going to turn into a pumpkin. Having consumed the sight with pleasure, Kathy turned to leave when she spotted a motionless Samuel in the center of the room, just staring at her. As though in a trance, she found she couldn't look away. With their eyes locked, the most intense connection burned between them, a connection that, despite her attempts to the contrary, neither seemed able to resist. Kathy tried her hardest to swallow, but the mechanism failed. Her throat was simply too dry. She tried again, but stopped midway through as she watched Samuel raise his hand into the air and signal her over with a single forefinger. Instantly, warmth flooded her tummy. It was a sensation which spread lower still when Samuel's mouth was transformed by a small smile. This wasn't happening to her, surely to the heavens. The temptation to glance behind just to confirm Samuel's attention was on her and not somebody else was too much to resist. Sure, it felt as though his eyes were piercing into her soul, but it seemed like such an unlikely scenario that Kathy subtly glanced to her left, then her right, only to find she was entirely alone. He wanted her. Although the distance made it difficult to be sure, Kathy thought she saw his gaze softening when their eyes met again. She didn't have long to ponder the issue, though, for he had begun to walk in her direction. Instinctively, her hand reached out for the pillar behind, in order to steady herself. "Please, would you dance with me?" he asked, holding out his hand as soon as they were within touching distance. Why?" she managed to stammer. "Because I want my first dance as a 40-year-old to be with you." "Of course," she mumbled, as he gently removed the coat and bag from her tightly clenched hands and passed them across to one of his own staff members for safekeeping. Then, taking an astonished Kathy by the hand, he led her towards the center of the dance floor. The tingle that accompanied his touch was immediate and absolute. To Kathy, it felt as though warmth was physically radiating from his hand to hers, before searing up her arm to consume her entire body. Never before had she experienced such a powerful reaction from one person. What power did this guy hold over her, to make her react in this way? "I'm not like any of these other women," explained Kathy, suddenly feeling incredibly self-conscious in her scruffy flat shoes and black and white uniform. Although, given the way she'd been treated by some of these allegedly beautiful women earlier, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. "No, you're not," he agreed. "Thank God, you are more refreshing than I can put into words." "But I'm really not dressed for this occasion," she whispered. "I don't know what you mean, Kathy," he confessed, wrapping his strong arms around her, as he started to lead them around the room in a proficient waltz. "You look flawless to me." Up to this point, Kathy's evening had been pretty awful if she was honest, particularly thanks to the two unpleasant stepsisters. But hearing Samuel's heartfelt words, combined with the knowledge that he'd remembered her name from their earlier conversation, filled her with a sense of contentment, happiness, and warmth. Samuel had been the coveted prize of so many women tonight, and yet he'd sought her out personally. And now, here the two of them were, dancing together, ignoring the nearby mutterings and looks of shocked disbelief. Somehow, even after the entire day on her feet, Kathy had discovered the energy, will, and desire to dance for as long as possible with this fascinating and incredibly handsome man. "I mean that I'm a waitress in work attire," she laughed, sounding a little flustered. "And there are dozens of women surrounding us who are far more beautiful than me, and they all want to dance with you." At that point, she dared to glance across at the two unattractive stepsisters, allowing Kathy to truly understand the saying, "Looks like a bulldog chewing on a wasp." Their expressions were so sour that the women's mouths had almost entirely disappeared. Samuel followed her line of sight, frowning slightly when he realized who Kathy was referring to. "They want to date a paycheck," he said dismissively, "and I won't give them the satisfaction. Besides, they've got no elegance." Kathy laughed, instantly pleased by the knowledge that Samuel was capable of seeing straight through their vacuous personalities. "And you think a waitress does have elegance?" "I don't judge people on their job title. I judge people by their character, and you can try as hard as you wish, but nothing you say will stop me believing that you are the most beautiful woman in this room." Unable to process the fact that he'd called her beautiful, Kathy decided to just live in the moment. So instead of entering into any further debate, she chose to spend those next 4 minutes absorbing him. Thrilled by his company, enchanted within his embrace, Kathy wanted nothing more than for their dance to last forever. It was therefore a wonderful surprise when, as the band shifted from the end of one track into the next, Samuel failed to release her. Despite a number of women rushing forward to take her place, Kathy instead found his arms tightening around her. "Please stay with me," he growled softly against her silky hair. Kathy couldn't quite comprehend what the intention behind his cryptic words was. Was he asking her to stay for another dance? Or did he mean for her to spend the night with him? The thought of it sent a rush of excitement through her, and her legs almost gave out from the heady anticipation. Not able to seek any clarification, she merely nodded at Samuel and shared a smile with him as the music continued to guide them. No one would have guessed she had worked a grueling 12-hour shift on her feet, judging by the way she swirled effortlessly in his embrace. They continued to glide across the floor, lost in their own world. No other woman had even the slightest chance. Energized, she felt she could dance forever, and ended up doing just that. The entire time, they spoke almost constantly, covering a wide variety of subjects. Enchanted and mesmerized, Kathy couldn't get enough of him. She had never met someone quite like Samuel. He was like a magnet, drawing everything and everyone into his orbit. "I don't want to let you go," Samuel would occasionally murmur into her ear. "Then don't," she responded without hesitation. Even when they paused to sip their drinks, they remained physically close. It was as if they'd found something extraordinary in each other, something they didn't want to let go of, fearing it might vanish and they'd never cross paths again. It was well past 2 a.m. when the band announced the final song. It was a slow ballad, giving Samuel the chance to let his fingers sensually glide across Kathy's back. It wasn't the first time Kathy found herself wishing the staff were all fast asleep, tucked away in their rooms, given the rather passionate display she was part of. "I should, probably leave?" The way her words trailed off revealed her uncertainty. It was clear that, aside from not fully grasping what was happening between them, Kathy had little experience with men. She had never felt anything like this before and didn't know how to process it. "Do you want to go?" asked Samuel, sounding like the devil himself. "No." Kathy shook her head gently, unafraid to be entirely honest with him. "Then, like I requested before, please stay." "Stay? What does that even mean?" "Stay for what? The party's almost over." "But our party has only just begun." Kathy's mouth quivered gently as disbelief seeped from her stare. Are you… What? He countered teasingly. Are you suggesting… She began once again, before running out of suitable words. To remedy the temporary silence, Samuel bent low, pressing his mouth against her ear. I'm suggesting that you stay the night and we make love, he whispered intimately. And if you enjoy it, then I'm suggesting that you stay tomorrow night, and the next night, and the night after. For an unspecified length of time, because dancing isn't the only thing I want to experience with you for the first time in my 40s. You can't say that, she gasped, incredibly innocent where intimacy was concerned. Why? Because you're a waitress and I'm a millionaire? Or because you're the tender age of 21 and I'm a reprehensible 40-year-old? Can't you just accept that there's this incredible connection between us which I'm keen to investigate further, and one of the best places to do that is horizontally? Damn, I am literally dying to be with you. Not knowing where to look, Kathy buried her face against his chest, embarrassed about the dramatic impact his naughty statements of intent were having on her body. Are you shocked? He murmured, carefully trying to judge her reaction. Have I said too much? No, she admitted, shaking her head lightly. I'm just trying to hide the fact that I'm grinning like a total idiot. Returning to gaze back up at him with her trusting blue eyes, they shared a secret smile that confirmed Samuel would be getting his wish granted in due course. Buoyed by the fact that he hadn't frightened her away by admitting his true intentions, Samuel's admissions gradually became more explicit. Meanwhile, Kathy focused on just breathing. Having achieved that in a satisfactory manner, while a very attractive guy murmured such wicked endearments directly to her soul, she briefly gazed around her in an attempt to ground herself. Quite unbelievably, the two ugly stepsisters remained watchful and present. Surely Samuel had been clear enough about his intentions, given he hadn't released Kathy's body for hours. Unsurprisingly, they looked as though they wanted to strangle her. Kathy knew she shouldn't be smug about the turn of events, but she did obtain a strange sense of satisfaction from it, knowing she was the one he'd chosen, in her plain black and white uniform, despite the time and money others had spent in order to compete for Samuel's attention. A plain waitress had ultimately triumphed over beauty and wealth, just by being herself. But Kathy wasn't cruel. So instead of making the women feel as small as they'd made her feel earlier, she simply slid her eyes away and returned her gaze to the person that mattered. I'd like that, she admitted, causing a massive grin to split his face. Instantly he kissed her on the hand. Samuel's lips were warm, moist, and very appealing, making Kathy yearn for much more of the same, ideally directed upon more intimate parts of her anatomy. Why are you single? She sighed breathily, seconds before her body tensed up. Oh God, she added in horror. I assume you are single? I'm single, chuckled Samuel. Through choice. Why? A lot of men have settled down by 40, you know, she added teasingly. Because I've never found the right person, he shrugged. And I refuse to compromise for anything but the best, both in my business and personal life. It's a strategy that's seen me right this far. Well, I'm pretty confident I'm not the best, she laughed, not oblivious to the irony of their situation. Kathy had expected Samuel to laugh along with her, but instead he paused their dance, ran his hand up to her jaw, and stared down at her directly. Two things, he stated, his demeanor surprisingly stern. Firstly, don't ever belittle yourself in front of me again, or I will put you straight over my knee wherever we are. Indeed, I'm not afraid to do so right now. So watch your next words carefully. Kathy gazed back at him in astonishment. She knew it probably wasn't the correct response, but his words were creating all kinds of delicious flutterings through her body, which were, in turn, making her head spin and her knees weak. But Samuel wasn't finished yet. Secondly, what constitutes best is a very personal choice. What I believe to be best might not be true for the next man. In fact, it would be pretty boring if everyone wanted the same thing. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on this occasion and revise my statement to best for me. Which I think you'll have to admit, I'm in the ultimate position to judge. You do realize you're very much in demand, though, don't you? You mean Celia and Margot? He asked, dropping his voice further, so the two women couldn't overhear their private conversation. You noticed them? It's kind of difficult not to, he laughed. I think there's a pretty decent chance I'll receive a death threat before tomorrow, joked Kathy. I also know what they want and they aren't getting it. I only desire people with whom I share a strong connection, and I have zero connection with either of those women. But what's happening between you and me? Now that's got significant potential, don't you agree? Yeah, I guess. You only guess? He smirked. Sounds like I've got a little persuading to do. So you're not, she began, with absolutely no idea what the rest of her sentence was going to be. Looking for an easy fling, he suggested. Kathy paused before issuing a brief nod. Somehow he'd managed to sum up all her concerns in 5 simple words. Would their intimacy mean anything whatsoever to him, or was she just another woman in a very long line? No, I'm not. Which makes me wonder, what? Well, what exactly are you looking for? It was a fair question, and Samuel took a few moments before answering it as honestly as he could. I'm not a one-night stand kind of guy, but I don't get the impression that's what you're looking for. Kathy shook her head vehemently. I didn't think so, he continued, but I do honestly sense something very special between us. Yes, breathed Kathy. She wasn't massively experienced in life, and certainly not with affairs of the heart, but the feelings she got beside Samuel felt similar to when she was with her nearest and dearest. She sensed an inexplicable link, a connection, which drew her in, wanting to be closer to him. There's no pressure, and if I'm wrong, then we can walk away with no hard feelings. But if I'm right? Well, the sky's the limit, right? Right. So I can't make any promises, other than to assure you that I have good intentions and a kind heart. So, can I interest you in joining me upstairs? What, right now? She squeaked, glancing around at the large number of party guests who still remained. I was clear on the invitation, he shrugged, dancing until 2. It's 10 past the hour already, so let's go and have some fun of our own. What's the plan, then? Grinned Kathy. Are you going to sneak me up a secret staircase to your bedroom? She was in the process of overdosing on adrenaline and anticipation, leaving her feeling as nervous as anything, but she was still going to tease him. No, baby, he smiled. We're going to walk straight up the main staircase. Ready? He inquired, holding out a single arm for her to take hold of. The expression on his face confirmed he was totally serious. Kathy glanced one final time around the room, chewing on her lip. The ugly stepsisters had literally been waiting for Samuel all evening, and they looked upset. As I'll ever be, she admitted, placing her hand on his proffered arm, before they walked boldly up the main staircase towards his bedroom. But as they made their way along an enormous landing, passing multiple doors on their way, Kathy began to lose her nerve. I don't normally do this, she began. This? Samuel teased. Do you mean be intimate? Or accept wickedly immoral offers from strangers? Or go to bed with a guy who's old enough to be your father? Any or all of the above, she acknowledged, her cheeks visibly warming as they inevitably traveled closer to his bedroom. But although Samuel had initially been teasing her, just outside what Kathy assumed was his bedroom door, they stopped. The friendly amusement disappeared from his features as a more serious expression took over. Have you had intimacy before, sweetheart? He asked gently. Kind of, she stuttered. Just not very. There was a long pause while Kathy desperately grappled for a word which remained just out of reach. Effectively, she eventually settled upon. Effectively? Samuel was obviously trying to be sensitive, but he couldn't prevent a wide grin spreading across his face at her choice of word. Well, I've had a lot of intimacy in my time, but I would sincerely hope that none of it could be described as effective. Kathy giggled, despite her nerves. You know what I mean, she chided. I'm not entirely sure I do, but I do know I can't wait to find out. Opening the door to his private quarters, Samuel led Kathy inside the beautifully decorated room. But almost instantly, having seen the enormous 4-poster bed in the center and rightly understood what was going to happen next, she froze. Okay, time out, Samuel announced. I'm so sorry I'm not good at this, she stuttered, feeling utterly ashamed that she didn't have the confidence to simply enjoy what both of them clearly wanted. I told you not to run yourself down. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt on this occasion, because I understand you're anxious, but this is your final warning. On the next occasion, you're going straight over my knee, no questions asked, stated Samuel sternly, before his tone softened once again. Now come and sit down over here. He led Kathy across the room to sit on the edge of his bed. Dropping to his knees, he tenderly removed her shoes from her trembling feet before standing up to address her. I give you my word that nothing will happen here until you're ready, he promised. In fact, I'm going one step further than that. Nothing happens until you come onto me. Well, then nothing is probably ever going to happen, she said sadly, because I've never taken the lead that way in my life. In which case we will simply be fully clothed and cuddle each other all night, he explained. And that will also be very enjoyable. So come and lie down beside me. Still nervous, Kathy settled down on the bed as Samuel tucked in behind her. Pulling a light cover over them both, there they lay as he amicably stroked her forearm. See, I'm not so scary, am I? He muttered once Kathy had released several long, relaxed sighs. I don't think you're bad at all, she admitted. I said scary, he corrected. I'm afraid I can't promise not to be bad. Samuel took her gentle chuckle as a good sign that she was at last feeling more confident in his company. Good girl, he growled, stroking a hand across her soft hair before dropping a kiss on her shoulder. I thought you said you weren't going to come on to me, she moaned, loving the intimacy. That's not coming on to you, sweetheart, that's cherishing you. Speaking of which, will you allow me to do something for you? He murmured against her ear. What? Instantly, Kathy's imagination began exploding with possibilities, ranging from innocent activities to very passionate ones. You've been on your feet all day, he explained, tone full of sympathy. I'd love to give you a foot massage if you're willing. Instantly, a thrilling wave of goosebumps rippled up Kathy's spine. Her feet had always been incredibly sensitive, so Samuel's suggestion seemed almost designed to intensify her feelings even further. Sure enough, as his warm, oiled hands began to tenderly massage her aching foot, Kathy felt herself melt under his touch. The sensation of his gentle pressure on such a sensitive spot made her breath quicken, filling her with a longing that left her nearly breathless. At first, Samuel held her foot lightly, almost teasingly, but as Kathy relaxed into his touch, he increased the pressure, kneading away all the tension and aches of her long day, replacing them with a delicious warmth that spread through her. Once he'd fully devoted his attention to one foot, he smoothly transitioned to the other, repeating each touch with the same deliberate care. As his fingers traced gently between her toes and pressed into the thickened skin of her heel, Kathy found herself drifting to another place, overcome by waves of relaxation and pleasure. Each touch sent her imagination into a rush of anticipation, vivid with images of their bodies entwined and intimate. After what felt like a blissfully long time, Samuel finally returned her feet to the bed, tucking himself beside her once again and wrapping her in a warm embrace. That was incredible, Kathy murmured after a while, her breath spilling out in a sigh that sounded like pure surrender. Lethal, but incredible. Lethal? Sweetheart, I already told you I'm not making any moves tonight. But how could she possibly explain that he already had? She felt completely captivated, and if she'd had just a little more experience, she would have easily bridged the distance between them herself. But you feel more relaxed, right? He asked softly. Yeah, she sighed. And excited. Samuel chuckled quietly behind her. Well, I don't see how that's a bad thing. I want you to feel this way. Imagine the thrill when I taste your desire, knowing I'm the one who stirred it up. Samuel, she gasped, her voice a mix of surprise and intrigue. But he wasn't done yet. That it's all just for me, he continued, his voice low and teasing. I can't wait to see what happens when you let go completely. Will you sigh, moan in disbelief, or call out so loudly it echoes through my entire home? Which will it be, Kathy? What will I bring out of you? Kathy's head spun, her mind blank under the effect of his teasing words and their intensifying proximity. Blushing, her heart raced with the thrill of his promises, leaving her nearly breathless. This man had a dangerously playful mind, but it only made her more intrigued to see where things would lead. I guess that's officially the end of the timeout you called, she eventually managed, her voice soft. Not at all, he grinned. The timeout ends only when you make the first move. But, she started, thrown by his unhurried confidence. I said I wouldn't touch, but I never said I wouldn't talk, he smirked. And I think you secretly like hearing just how much I want you. Please, I'm all ready, she whispered, flushed, so turned on. Then do something about it, he murmured back, his eyes dancing. Began Kathy before her argument simply evaporated, like dew from the lawn on a warm summer morning. Turn and face me, Kathy, he moaned, adding a good girl when she obediently followed his instructions. Now kiss me. Is this you not seducing me? I'm not doing anything, Samuel laughed. Look, no hands, he added, raising his arms up above his head as they grinned at each other. Apart from hugging you, I'm not going to touch you. We'll see, she challenged, sounding incredibly confident. You do know you're every kind of dangerous, right? She muttered. It was an accusation which seemed to amuse Samuel. He certainly made no attempt to deny it. Ha, you reckon? Now kiss me. Kathy gazed into his eyes, honest and true, experiencing a massive burst of desire. It took no more than a second to make her decision. Placing both of her hands around his strong jaw, she lowered her mouth to his. With his hands remaining above his head, Samuel kissed her back with enthusiasm. At first, their kiss consisted only of delicately teasing lips, yet Kathy still found herself both enraptured and overwhelmed. But it wasn't long before she desired more. With a low groan, her hands wound around the back of his head to pull Samuel deeper, allowing their tongues to entwine for the first time. Her low moans of pleasure were instantly mirrored by a deep rumble in his chest. Suddenly, apparently quite unable to prevent himself, Samuel's hands migrated down from above his head. Weakening, he allowed them to slide over her body for the first time, ultimately cupping Kathy's butt, which firmly locked their pelvises together. Only then, in shocked fascination, did she realize that Samuel was starting to assist her secret, private, ever-so-dirty thoughts. With his hands firmly around her butt, he started to rock her pelvis against his own, setting up the most delicious of sensations and destroying Kathy's ability to regulate her own breathing. Pulling back, she broke their kiss, panting hard. Samuel, you said you wouldn't touch me. I'm not, he groaned, obviously enjoying the experience as much as she was. She gasped, What do you think you're doing? I'd have thought that was obvious, sweetheart, he groaned. Is it making you even wetter for me? She chewed on her bottom lip. There could be no denying that his actions were doing exactly that. Kathy wasn't sure she'd ever felt so turned on in her life. Her hand reached around his waist, caressing the side of his hip while Samuel stared back at her, undaunted. Go on, touch me. I dare you. With her eyes locked onto his and without losing that connection, Kathy's hand stroked down to his groin, causing Samuel's eyelids to flicker. It was the first time she'd seen even the slightest suggestion of weakness, providing a glimpse of what it might look like to have this wonderful man lose control in her arms. Instantly, she was hooked. Unable to prevent herself, Kathy's hands stroked him softly, reveling in his low moans of appreciation. She didn't need any further encouragement to unfasten his trousers, pushing them away. Go on, baby, he moaned. I want you to explore me, just like I need to explore you too. We've got the whole night ahead of us, the whole of tomorrow, as long as you want. You can do whatever you want. Nothing is off limits in this room. With a small grin, Kathy wiggled down the bed and pulled off his underwear. Taking him at his word, she lowered her mouth to his body, delicately kissing it. The way she touched him was surprisingly innocent and drove Samuel unexpectedly wild. Oh yes, he grunted. Then Samuel gently pulled away, encouraging her back up the bed. Lie down here and let me admire you, he sighed. Having stripped off the few remaining items of his own clothing, he kneeled above Kathy while tenderly stripping her down to just her black bra and panties. Perfection, he groaned, fully appreciating the sight of her slender young body, trembling and squirming on his bed covers. And then Samuel dropped his mouth to her big toe, before slowly kissing and nibbling up the entire length of her body, only stopping when he'd reached her mouth. There he trapped her in place with his much larger body, skin against skin, and allowed their tongues to do all the talking. Their kiss was exquisite, deep and seductive, with more than a suggestion of promise. Please touch me, she gasped, desperate to feel even closer to this amazing man, as his hands stroked up and down her sides, causing her to spasm and twist against him. How exactly? Samuel's tone was teasing and playful. "Would you like me to suckle gently on your breast? Graze my teeth down your tummy?" "Oh," Kathy gasped, his words directly impacting her ability to function. "Give me an answer," pressed Samuel, starting to kiss his way down her neck, his wandering hand easily flicking open her bra strap. "Oh God, all of that, everything," she yelped as he pulled away her bra to leave her breasts fully exposed. "Deal," he grunted. "You are so incredibly beautiful." With infinite tenderness, Samuel pressed his lips to Kathy's skin, his touch soft and affectionate, making her feel a thrilling sense of connection and warmth. She arched her back instinctively, savoring the closeness between them and letting herself relax completely. Kathy suddenly yelped when his teeth began to compress her breast. "Too much?" he murmured, pausing for a moment, eyes warm with affection. "Or not quite enough?" Kathy met his gaze, her breathing uneven, but she managed a shy smile. "Not quite enough," she whispered softly. They shared a knowing look, and he resumed his gentle, attentive touch, deepening the moment between them. As they continued, Kathy felt a warm rising sensation spread through her. She was swept up in the intensity of the moment, feeling both exhilarated and completely at ease, immersed in a sense of freedom she hadn't known before. After a long while, Samuel moved lower, letting his hands graze along her sides. He noticed her body tense slightly, and with a reassuring whisper, he encouraged her to relax, promising that he was there only to bring her comfort and joy. Gradually, Kathy relaxed as Samuel requested, leaning back and letting out a soft sigh. After a long period of playful teasing, he carefully slid her dampened panties down her legs, leaving her feeling both exposed and deeply connected to him in that vulnerable moment. Sensing her need for reassurance, Samuel lay beside her, drawing her into a lingering kiss that made her heart race. His hand naturally traced a slow, deliberate path along her skin, his touch careful yet charged, igniting sensations that made her feel almost breathless. As he continued with that tender, attentive care, Kathy felt a rush of emotion she couldn't quite name, a mix of anticipation and surrender. Samuel's calm confidence put her at ease, and his touch seemed designed to keep her present in the moment, drawing out her pleasure without rushing. What are you?" she whispered, unable to finish the question. But he seemed to understand her curiosity. "I'm just showing you how incredible this can feel," he murmured softly, his voice a soothing anchor. "Just relax. Let go of any expectations. Are you ready for this?" Yes, I think so," she managed, finding herself unable to form more than a few words. "Good," he replied, a gentle smile in his voice. "Then just enjoy. This moment is all about you." Kathy's mind reeled, but her body responded naturally, sinking into the warmth and care he was offering. As his hand moved lower in a slow, steady rhythm, her breaths came faster, and a sense of release began to build until she let herself truly be in the moment, fully surrendering to the experience. When Samuel finally allowed her to rest, Kathy was incapable of focusing her eyes on any specific point. Buzzing, almost high, she simply grinned back at him, her young body awash with so many feel-good hormones that it felt as though she was floating. "That was," she stuttered, her throat sore from crying out. "Efficient?" suggested a grinning Samuel, instantly causing her to giggle. "That's not the word that immediately springs to mind." "I need to be close to you," Samuel murmured, his hand resting softly on the curve of her waist. "May I?" Kathy felt a flutter of anticipation, momentarily speechless, but gave him a small nod. She wanted to embrace everything this wonderful man was offering. Samuel leaned over her, his warmth enveloping her as he kissed her slowly, deeply, savoring each moment without rushing. The closeness made her breath quicken, her body responding instinctively, seeking more. "Please," she whispered, pulling him closer. Samuel let out a soft groan, meeting her need with equal passion. He held her gently, every touch filled with care and intent, ensuring her comfort. Their movements became a steady rhythm, and the world seemed to fall away as they connected, completely absorbed in each other. Kathy's breath came in shallow gasps, her fingers clutching his shoulders, completely lost in the intensity of the moment. "Are you okay?" he whispered, pausing to look into her eyes. "Yes," she managed between breaths, her body shuddering with each passing moment. As they continued, the sensation built, each of them lost in the powerful connection. Samuel held her close, not stopping until he knew she was fulfilled, bringing her to the peak of their shared experience. In a final wave of release, she cried out, surrendering completely, her body overcome with a joy that seemed endless. "Go on, let go," he whispered against her neck, holding her as she trembled, wrapped up in the warmth and closeness they shared. For a moment there was utter silence, and then a guttural roar of pure pleasure filled the air. Retracting very carefully from Kathy's body, Samuel collapsed onto the bed beside her, staring vacantly up towards the ornately plastered ceiling. Surprisingly, Kathy was the first to recover. With a low moan of gratification, she rolled toward Samuel, her hand sliding across his torso. "I need you again," she grunted, immediately causing a grin to spread across his face. "I haven't made you too sore? I wasn't exactly gentle at the end." "You were amazing," she sighed, "which is why I want to make love with you again." That's my girl. Give me a few minutes and your wish will be my command. But until then, I believe I have a little cleaning up to do." And with a broad smile, Samuel wiggled back down the bed, determined to do all he could to make this amazing woman want to stay with him indefinitely.